I'm excited to have you on today, Bobby. We were talking a little bit about you earlier. Man, I mean, I'm going to give you a quick introduction and then I'm going to give you the floor here. But this is a guy that I played with in the American Hockey League. And, when you talk about making an impact on a team coming in, mid-season or partial season, I mean, you're looking at the guy right here. I mean, this is one of the toughest, scariest, but also nicest people that I ever played hockey with. And his story is incredible. The way he really started at the bottom and worked his way up to the NHL and an NHL contract. And you've been through, hell and back almost. And it's good to see your face, man. And I can't wait to hear about your book, but how are you, buddy? Like, how are things?
What's going on, guys? It's been far too long, Colby, man. We had some battles out there. Toughest guys in the American Hockey League, I guess. Me and you on the P Bruins.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had some great times, and oh man, it's awesome to see you guys on this show and to see you guys having success now. Post hockey is really cool to see and inspiring, and something I want to aspire to. So. Blessed to be here and excited to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, especially the book. Got the Savage memoir coming out soon. I actually got a few excerpts I want to read to you guys if you guys don't mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can get into that, and just good to be here, guys.
Well, Bobby, quickly, I just want to bring up the fact you mentioned Colby was a tough player. He acts like the tough guy on this show. Can you actually back it up that he was tough on the ice? Because it's hard to find those highlights on YouTube. You guys played so long ago.
It looks like it's from the 70s when you look at those YouTube clips. But yeah, Cohen, he combined just skill and grit. It was inspiring to see. No, he was a great player. I mean, a good solid D-man, silky out there. But we make fun of him a little bit, but he played hard and rugged and tough. And a little backstory of why I kind of tease him as one of the toughest guys in the American Hockey League. He had a legendary fight with the toughest guy in the American Hockey League, Brett Gallant. And when I got called up there to Providence, I think it must have been like day 1 or 2, Colby came up to me and he let me know. He said, I did fight Brett Gallant out there and did pretty well.
So you weren't there you weren't actually there for that? You came after that?
That was after. I think that's why they called me up. They're like, we don't need this guy fighting guys like Gallant anymore.
Yeah, it was that was a mistake on my part, by the way. That was bad recognition of who I was tangling up with. And I think it was a Sunday playing against Bridgeport. This guy had like hundreds of penalty minutes. And, I definitely was not a tough player, Jonny, but Bobby will back me up on this. I was not afraid to drop my gloves if I needed to. I was not afraid. And I wasn't afraid to lose either, because most of the time when my gloves came off, I lost. So it was never as pretty as Bobby's. But I just remember my Bobby gets called up to our American League team. And if I remember correctly, your first game was in Portland. Is that right, Bobby? Am I remembering it correctly?
That's right. Yeah.
And Portland had a bunch of big, stronger, older guys. Like, they were a good team, and nobody knew who Bobby was. Like, we didn't know who he was. And he comes in to a game in his first game in the American League with us, and he absolutely buried someone. I don't remember who you buried. Do you remember? I don't remember who it was.
I mean, you teed me up there.
In chapter 6.
I'm going to read. Yeah. Let's turn to the chapter. A little backstory. That was actually Ryan Hallweg.
Oh, no way.
Tough guy. And
wow.
We've connected here after our careers, and he's been rooting for me. Told him he was in my book and everything. But he plays a huge part in my story. And actually I think I get into it here, but my first year pro, I was watching Hallweg when he played for New York. I was in the American League in Binghamton, and I was watching this guy flying around and hitting guys and fighting guys. And he's like the player that I wanted to be. And then
nails.
Tough as nails. And then fast forward 5-6 years later, I'm called up to the American Hockey League after forever being out of it and feeling like a failure and kind of having a comeback. And now I'm lined up against him. I'm like, oh man, this is the guy I have to fight today. So you guys has anybody ever read like literature style on the podcast?
Look, we're going to put, we're putting, I don't know if you can see the screen or not, Bobby. Yeah. So you can see it. This is Bobby's book right here. Sex, Drugs, Pucks, and Souls, The Secret Life of a Hockey Fighter. That picture is so great. Your nose is plugged up. You got the cut on the bridge. We're going to put the link for Bobby's book in our chat on YouTube. So make sure you check that out. And Bobby, if you want to read an excerpt, go ahead, man. We'd love to hear it.
Cool. I will, but I'll say this cover here, that was when I broke my nose. That was a nasty one. It was against Wilkes-Barre. But our boy, Alan Sullivan, the Providence and Boston Bruins team photographer, who's now passed, he took this picture as I was exploding blood from my face. And pretty cool that it just ended up on the cover of my book, because he's a beloved guy in Providence especially. And shout out to Alan Sullivan and his people. So this is from chapter 9 called Becoming a Bruin. This is the backstory. As I had given up on my NHL dream. I got lost in just the party scene and, chasing girls and chasing drugs and any form of escape. But I was really fighting a lot of internal demons and battles. And one of them was just fear. I think a lot of people have that commonality, is facing fear. And mine was a very real fear of literally having to fight grown men, savages like Colby here. I mean, kind of feeling that pressure to do that and to be molded into that player. And I had skipped town. I went to Europe and was just like, screw this. I'm just going to party and play hockey. I don't want to fight. Won't give too much away, but I ended up having a comeback. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to fight my way to the NHL. And late in my career, I was almost 30 years old. And then things started happening. I got the call up to Providence. And I was like, man, I'm only one step away now from the dream. And so this is kind of the midway point in the story. Is this podcast rated G or
you can say whatever the fuck X you want?
Okay.
Read it as you would, my friend.
I can say an F word if need be. All right. So chapter 9, Becoming a Bruin. I've been drinking my own urine every morning. Catch it midstream in a pint glass and slurp it down, looking into the mirror and morphing into something raw. I'd heard about some MMA fighters who drink that yellow gold for the healing properties, that magical urea. I picture my cells and muscle fibers growing stronger as I guzzle it down each morning. I bet I'm the only one drinking my own piss, the only one going that extra mile. Plus, I like the taste. The brakes moan beneath the bus. There's no turning back now. We pull into that big barn in Portland, and I see the Pirates players all kicking around a soccer ball in the hall near the entrance. I keep my stare straight ahead and wonder if any of them know who I am. I continue my death stare well into the locker room and prepare just like any other game. Dynamic warm-up, violent visualization, the usual. Coach Cassidy calls me into the office and goes over the systems. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, he says. You know how to play hockey. Go play good hockey. I'm ready to lay everything on the line. Just put me out there, coach. There is this one guy, coach adds, Ryan Hallweg. He knocked our captain out with a concussion, been a real thorn in our side all season. Keep your head up out there. I just nod my head and snarl slightly on the inside, that area right under my neck and above my heart. There's a growling in there that only I can hear. I got him, I say. I flash back to 6 years ago during my rookie season with the Binghamton Senators. My coach asked me what kind of player I thought I was, who I want to model my game after. I see myself as a Ryan Hallweg, I said, a heat-seeking missile. I'd watched him closely during my rookie season when he played for the New York Rangers, and I love the way he plays, with reckless abandon, with fire. He's a warrior, laying massive hits and fighting like a madman. He's my favorite player. Today, I'm fighting him. I'm terrified, but ready. Then there he is, lined up against me at the face-off dot during my first shift, first game, first call-up in years. The dialogue runs through my head. I know I should ask him to fight, but when? Now? I don't want to fight my first shift. I don't want to be a one-dimensional goon. I want to show Providence that I can play and be an impact player. When it comes time to throw bones at my opponent, then it's time. It will present itself. I bring my gaze to the face-off dot and see the linesman hovering the puck between two eager centermen. Crack! The smooth face of the puck hits square onto the ice and ignites a frenzy of armor-clad warriors chasing that rubber disc of destiny. Then it happens. The exact moment that I turn toward the boards in the neutral zone, Hallweg picks up a suicide pass from his left defenseman. As he lowers his head and turns back to receive the grenade, I drive my body through his, an explosion of fractal geometric patterns of sweat and soul laying him out. The crunching sound of the hit is followed by that collective gasp from the crowd and cheers and boos. He's flying backward through the air and flat onto his ass. And I hear him groan in slow motion. We're going. Fight time. It's him. It's Hallweg. His helmets and gloves are off, granite eyes piercing through wild flowing hair and thickets of beard. His fists are up, and so are mine. We're squared up, and I'm trying not to look him in the eyes. He lunges forward and throws a sweeping left punch. It just misses my face. I hear the sound of it as it moves past my nose. It makes a sort of cracking noise as it pierces through a miniature pocket of the sound barrier and instantly snaps me into game time mode, fully focused and 100% present in the moment, ready to put my fist through his face and prove that I belong here in the American Hockey League. We're chucking bombs back and forth now, and one of mine connects hard. My knuckle penetrates his notion of reality, and he crumbles into a heap on the ice. The fight's over. I won. I just sit there in the penalty box and look up at the arena full of screaming fans. I'm back. I skate to the Providence bench after serving my 5 minutes. Everyone is just looking at me like they don't know what to say, or they're waiting for me to say something to break the silence, something to officially introduce myself to my new team. I don't know, something, anything. Well, fuck that guy, I say. My teammates unanimously heave up courage from out of their guts and lungs and yell out a bellowing war cry, knowing that they have an absolute savage on their team who's willing to fight for them. Fuck that guy. From this moment on, I'm a Bruin. You can feel it. Like destiny tiptoeing behind me and pretending I don't hear it, but I know it's there. I sense it. So that's the scene.
I mean, when you're reading that, I can visualize being in that old rink in Portland. You know, the Portland Pirates, at one point they were with the Coyotes, at one point they were with Buffalo. And I mean, man, I can visualize the beard, like Hallweg's beard and his hair. I mean, and it's true. Bobby makes this play in this game, and we're looking at each other, and he mentioned we didn't have our captain, Trent Whitfield. He was out, right? So, you know, Trent played a few hundred games for the Bruins. He's now a coach in the American League. But, like, we were looking at each other, and we had this sort of younger group, and we were like, maybe it was Chris Bork who was sitting next to me at the time. And was Borky there when you were there? It's hard to. And I looked at him, and I went, what just happened? Like, we were mouth dropped on the ground after watching you absolutely bury him and then fight him. You're right. In that very moment, everybody else on the bench was like, holy shit, this guy is here to stay. Like, you know, first of all, great writing too, man. I mean, that's
Thank
like,
you, man.
You could feel the emotion of that. People are commenting in our chat right now, just like the poetic violence of that
I like
excerpt that you just read was
even just the sound incredible. Of the puck drop. Like you could like hear it in your head, you know?
Yeah. Crack.
Yeah. I mean, it's
automatopoeia, that's called.
Yeah. I mean, that was such a great moment, Bobby. Like I remember that moment so well. I bet you not many guys on those teams that I was on remember a single moment that I had in 4 years. So I can vividly remember that moment. Like I can go back to that place, and that launched you, right? I mean, you know, that put you on a path to your way to the NHL, like that moment right there, because, you know, give our audience a timeline from that moment to your first NHL game. And also, how old were you at the time when this all started? Like this moment?
Yeah, I mean, that moment when I got called up to Providence, I was 29. So I was pretty late out. That was my, I think, 6th year pro. But I mean, we always look at people's, you know, you always hear like an instant success, and people look at success stories and they're like, oh, you know, it must have came easy for that guy. But obviously we know that it's the stuff that nobody sees behind the scenes. And man, that moment there was, for me, that was years in the making. That was like really 3 years of full-time fight training and like fighting everyone in the East Coast Hockey League, and just dreaming of being like, man, at that point where I was at, I was like, if I can just get to a call up to the American Hockey League, I will have proved it to myself that anything's possible. And when that happened, it's kind of like, although everything, you know, it's like the stars align and everything just comes together. And literally the first shift, that for that to happen, to have an opportunity to crush a guy and then to win a fight, you know, and how many times do you hear of guys who got called up, or we've experienced it, where you try your hardest to make an impact, but nothing's happening out there, you know. But this was just one of those moments where everything just clicked together. And like you said, and like you heard in those words there, is I felt it. I was like, oh shit, this is happening. This is the real deal. This is happening. I just felt it. And then so from that moment on, it was like they told me to pack for a week, you know. So I had a duffel bag of clothes, and like, hey, stay 2 weeks. And then I was staying in the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Providence, the haunted Biltmore, and just like living in this beautiful room in the American Hockey League. And got back from practice one day, and they're like, oh, my key didn't work. And they said my stay was over. I was like, what? Like I hadn't been cut or anything. And so I called Don Sweeney. I'm like, yeah, what's going on? And he's like, oh yeah, you're still here. It's just like, tell them you still have the room. And so ended up, you know, staying for the whole year and signing a contract for the rest of that year. And then, you know, signing a couple AHL contracts, and you know, over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, establishing myself in the American League as a player and as a guy who can fight as well. And then, it would be about 3 years after that before I put on that Bruins sweater.
So 30 NHL debut at 32 years old, huh?
32, yeah. It was pretty crazy. Oldest rookie to make an NHL opening day roster. So, I mean, I still felt like I was in my 20s. I was young in my hockey years. I kept my my fitness pretty good at that point in my career. But yeah, I mean, I think it just goes to show what hard work can do. And anybody who's attained the high level of success knows the formula is just doing the little things every day. And I was still at the point in my life where I needed to prove that to myself, where I didn't know if I really believed it yet. I had talked the talk like everyone does, like, oh, I want to play in the NHL. I want to play in the NHL. But, you know, talking it is different than walking it. And especially for a guy like me who was going to have to fight to do it for real. It wasn't until I really committed like 100% all in and started doing all the little things where I started to see the success. And then, you know, all those synchronicities happen and things fall into place, like that Hallweg fight. I mean, that didn't happen by accident. That was after years of training and hours and dreaming and giving it everything I had.
Well, Bobby, that's something I want to talk about too, because, you know, I feel like everyone talks about, you know, working hard and that you just got to, you know, kind of put your head down, grind, and that's how you get to the NHL. And I think often it gets lost, excuse me, about how tough it is just mentally. And, you know, whether you're a fighter, whether you're a skill guy, power play guy, no matter what role you play on a team, there's a lot of time spent away from the rink when you play pro, when you play college. And, you know, I know for me, like when I wasn't playing well in whatever role I was playing in, I mentally beat myself up. And I think that's a big part of, you know, why I didn't really make it as a player. So for you to play in your first NHL game at 32, I'm sure there were so many, you know, mental battles and mental obstacles. And sure, you're working hard physically and you're putting in the time, but how do you train your brain? Because there are so many good hockey players that I know that just didn't make it because of everything up here. You know, it's so hard to be persistent and continue to just believe in yourself. So for you, like when you were away from the rink and, you know, shit wasn't going well, you know, how did you overcome that mentally?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I think we resonate in a similar way there of just, for me, it was belief of, I don't know if I ever had that true belief that I could do it. Like I would say it and I wanted it, but I think with a belief comes action. and for me, it took me halfway through my career to be able to get to that point where I was, I call it a good pro. I don't know if you remember that, Colby, just being a good pro, and
that was
I
Bruce
like
Cassidy's favorite line.
Oh, just we love the good pros, man. And how, coaches
Why
do.
hated
Coaches
me,
love a
Bobby.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I was a guy I didn't have the skill that Colby had, and I was a guy who just had to muck and grind and give it everything I had every day and to be that good pro. But yeah, I mean, once I started in that direction of really pursuing a goal and saying, all right, well, here's my goal. It's to get to the NHL. How am I going to get there? Personally, I got to be a guy who fights, 25 times a year. I'm going to make it as that fourth line fighter. And then I just kept breaking it down to deeper and deeper levels. Well, all right, how do I do that? Well, I have to become a really good fighter. Well, how do I do that? Well, I'm just going to fight everyone. And so that was my mentality. I was just going to fight everyone. And then I'm going to train harder than anyone. And I'm going to train my body and my mind and my spirit. And so for me, it was the whole kind of pursuit of the hockey dream up the hockey ladder was for me, it was a pursuit of kind of self-improvement. I didn't know that was happening yet. And it was all part of my evolution as a man. But it taught me a lot of things. And it taught me the biggest thing was the belief factor. Once I really believed that it could happen, it was like, I think there is something about, believe when you want something or you're achieving something, you believe that you already have it. And then you're just taking the steps in that direction to get there. And so, for me, it was breaking it down into those little chunks every single day. And, that's how I was able to write a book too, was taking that same mentality. I think anybody who's looking to achieve anything in business or success or in life, that's the formula that I found. And I'm no guru or expert. I'm still figuring it out myself. But, I found a formula that brought me hockey success. Now I was able to write a book, and it's like, all right, there is something to this about just believing in the process and be willing to do that slow grind every single day.
Well, I can attest to the fact that, look, in an American League season, 80 games, a lot of 3-and-3s. Sometimes when you're an American League team, you're practicing it at some weird little practice rink because the game rink is being shared or used for something else. And I mean, I would avoid going against Bobby in practice at all costs. Even in warm-ups before a game, I didn't like doing the 3-on-2s with him because I just was he did everything at 150% effort, and it's hard. Like, not many guys can go that hard that long. And I think you were always willing to go that hard and that long, which is probably why you wouldn't take no for an answer. I mean, very few guys have the mental fortitude to become an NHLer at 32 years old. I mean, it's like you said, you're the oldest guy to ever make an NHL opening night roster, oldest rookie, right? Like, there's a reason it doesn't happen. It takes a certain level of that mental strength that I think you have. And so, just curiously, Bobby, I do want to talk to you a little bit about the current NHL and what's going on with fighting right now. It's having a little resurrection. But before I do go there with you, like, talk a little bit about the process of writing your book. Like, when did that idea come to you, and how long did it take? How do you remember these things? I mean, with the fights and the travel and Jonny asked me, like, how many years did you play with Bobby? And I said, it might have been 1, but it could have been 3, because it just all blends together, especially at the pro level with players moving in and out and trades and this and that. So it really is remarkable what you've been able to do.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, it was a cool experience for me to go back and write about my career, because there was a lot of healing for me personally that needed to happen. I mean, my career ended on a pretty negative, I guess I'd call it, or a sour note for me, just kind of having an injury, and then really had a mental collapse and entered some pretty dark places, and probably realistically because of all the impacts I took on my head and because of fighting. But the process for me was very therapeutic. I mean, it's called a savage memoir. I'm a creative writing English major from UMass Lowell. So as I was playing D1 hockey, I was like, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to write this amazing book someday. I was doing it for real, learning creative writing in the process. But at the same time, hockey was always number one. I was like, I'm doing this hockey thing. I'm chasing this dream. I know this will be my story. I just had that instinct. And I think going back to the faith and belief in yourself is, for me, I've always had this inner voice, or this still small voice or instinct inside of me. And for me, it was just listening to that and trusting it. And that was part of my growth as a man and as an athlete. And so I knew I had this book to write and this story to tell, and I knew that it was going to be very impactful. And I wanted to lay it out there like balls exposed, a savage memoir. This is a deep dive into. It's not just a hockey hero story. Like this is sex, drugs, pucks, and souls. Like it's those four lenses of my life through those four lenses in a very deep and raw, excuse me, in an emotional way. And so after my career ended, I knew I wanted to write a book. I was like, well, this is next. Hockey's over. I'm a writer now. And I was at that point in my life, I was pretty deep in some drugs. And I just started I was like, wanted to be that crazy author who's just drunk and on drugs and writing. And I did. I wrote a large chunk of it kind of in this haze in a month, just blacked out, and just had about 100,000 words, which is a pretty big chunk. But it was all some wild stuff. There's a few nuggets of words. There were some diamonds in there, but a lot of it was just the drunken ramblings of a crazy ex-hockey fighter, So I sat on that, and I tried some other things. Just was trying to find my stride. I tried some coaching. I coached in Spain for the pro team in Spain, and did some things. But I always knew I just want to be a writer. I think I'm selling myself short here. And then it was right around when COVID hit about 4 years ago, where I looked at myself in the mirror and said, I've been given this story to tell. I think my story matters. This isn't just a tits and drugs, pussy stories. There are a lot of those, but it's not that. It's more. It's a deep book, and it's going to really, I think, spark a lot of conversations about just about sexuality and about what it means to be a man and what it means to be an athlete. So I was like, I have this God-given talent and this story and this ability to write it. And so about 3 years ago, I just kind of took those lessons I learned in hockey of, all right, if I have a big goal, how do I break it down into chunks? And I was like, all right, I'm going to write this many words a day. And it's like, when you eat an elephant, it's one bite at a time. And, all of a sudden one chapter formed. I was like, that's a crazy chapter. That's some wild stuff. And then all of a sudden I had 3, and I was like, this is way too intense. I can't write this book. I'm going to write so I ended up writing a children's book, and I was like, I just want to be a children's book writer. But then I was like, fuck, my story matters, man. And it ended up just forming chapter by chapter. And then over the course of about 2 years, I had a lot going on in life. I had 2 boys. I have 2 sons under 2. So I was trying to write this book and do it all myself. I started a publishing imprint called Rotterdam Books. We published Savage Memoirs, and writing this thing while all the while trying to raise 2 kids and 3 kids, but 2 under 2. And but it just formed little by little, and all of a sudden one day I looked at it and I was like, it's here. It's here. So yeah, it is here. So this is it. Sex, drugs, pucks, and souls. I poured my heart and soul into it. And yeah, I think it's definitely something that's gonna blow some minds.
At what age are you gonna let your kids read it?
I have a little in the in the
gotta be a little bit
acknowledgments.
of fear there, huh?
Well, there is for sure, and I actually talked about it in the acknowledgments. I'm like, please don't read this book. I said, but if you do, I want to be honest with my kids, and I have a 10-year-old daughter as well, so she's starting to ask a lot of questions, and it's like, when can I read the book? And she knows a little bit about my past, and we're trying to raise our kids, we homeschool our kids, and we're trying to raise them in a godly way and teach them good life lessons. But part of that is like, all right, I'm going to be honest. I was an idiot. Like I lived a very hard life, and I want to try and teach you guys. But yeah, that's definitely been an interesting issue to address within myself. I'm like, all right, how much do I say? Do I go all in? And then that was the same thing of facing that fear. That it was the same feeling I felt involved with hockey fighting. I was like, do I do this? Do I go all in? And so I knew that if I was to write a book, the story I had, it needed to be a savage memoir. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like your feel good, like, all right, rah rah rah. Here, I'm gonna fire you up, and you're gonna make it to the NHL. This is not that book.
Yeah.
This is savage memoir. So the warning on it says this on the first page. It says, warning: mature content, adult themes, graphic sexuality, explicit drug use, crude language, ultra-violence, exploding bodily fluids, general mayhem, and depictions of insanity that some readers may find disturbing. So it's
a fair enough warning.
Well, listen, I think, look, I think that first off, when talking a little bit about your family, Bobby, it's so cool to hear you talk about that and knowing you, like I did and I do. I'm sure you're an awesome parent because you don't have it in you to do anything halfway. So your kids are very lucky. They're probably learning amazing lessons and I'm sure you guys are doing an awesome job there. But just going back to some of those years, like that's what we called Bobby, the savage. Like we all played a lot more secure out there knowing we had Bobby by our side. And you know what? Look, I was a 22-year-old kid when we met, right? Like you were a hell of a lot more mature than I was. And you had been through the ringer and I had everything easy to that point. Right. And so I would have never known about any of these internal struggles or anything because you never brought them to the rink. Like, you smiled, you were happy, you were in a good mood, you wanted to share wisdom with guys, whether you were doing that recovery glove that you used to wear on your hand or whatever it may be. Like never did you let anybody know around us that like you were dealing with anything. We just knew like we've got Bobby on our side and Bobby's going to make sure that like we're good out there. And the league was dirty and hard at the time. Like the American League has changed in that regard. It's still a rough league, but it's not the jungle like it used to be. It's just not. The game has changed, I think, for the better. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not one of these old disgruntled, former players that's like the game's terrible now. I don't believe that at all. I love the speed. I love the skill, but I still love the physicality and the fighting. Just thinking about today's NHL, like Bobby, like where do you sit with it all now? Like Matt Rempe has come on to Broadway and stole the show and fights, and Revo seems to be reinvigorated with fighting in Toronto. And like, how does all that make you feel? Like, where do you sit and stand with all that?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I don't watch a whole lot of hockey these days. I don't have a lot of time to do that, chasing these kids around, but I do watch, anytime there's hockeyfights.com pops on my feed. Shout out to those guys. I watch all the hockey fights. I love watching hockey fights. Obviously I did that for a lot of years, and you're right. There has been a resurgence in that, or there's this new energy around it with Rempe and all of a sudden when McDermott, we played with Lane McDermott.
That's
now
right.
His little brother, who's a scary man out there, gets traded to the East. We're like, oh, this is happening. There's some tough guys out here, and it's cool to watch. I mean, there's nothing like a hockey fight. It's just like you said. It's like violent poetry in motion, and there's something deep inside of our guts and our soul, I think, as men, that sees that and is like, there's instant respect for it, and I think there's just a ingrained, I don't know what it is, a connection to it, that raw animalistic competition. There's something special about it. I love watching it. But at the same time, I know I've gone through my struggles, and I know a lot of guys who have taken a lot of shots in the head who are going through struggles too. And so I don't have that answer. I'm not taking a hard stance on it at this point. But yeah, I mean, we're all men, and you make that decision. And I think man, for me, I hope things end up well for me mentally and just physically with my brain and everything. But, I wouldn't trade anything for the world. I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't do it any differently. Maybe I would have been a little more defensive in some of my fights, but it's a crazy thing. I mean, why our sport's the one place where you can fight bare knuckles, and it's just always been that way. And I don't know. I mean, I think, will it always be that way? I don't know. What do you think? Is it going to change? But I think as long as it isn't changing and it's still there, it definitely has an impact on the game. Like you said, if I was coming in with playing on Boston, coming into New York, I'd be like, oh crap, man, I'm playing against Rempe, or I'm playing against Revo, and that, for a guy like me who's I'm thinking on the ice, I'm only thinking violence and smashing. Like, I'm only thinking forechecking, smashing a guy, and then getting in a fight as a fourth line checker. When I'm going into play and I'm playing against a team that has a guy like Gallant or Rempe or a tough guy, a notable tough guy who I do feel scared of, that affects me for sure. That affects me without a doubt. For me personally, I was either like going to get consumed by the fear, or I would take it to the next level and just black out completely and be like, I'm going to be so crazy that I'm just going to make the fight happen first shift, and so I had to work myself up into a frenzy. But it was like 50-50. Some days it was there, some days it wasn't. And I think that fighter role still exists for that reason. Everyone feels the fear, even if you're not a guy who's expected to go fight them. Like, you don't want to go back on a puck when Rempe is coming to hunt you down. So I don't know, man. It's a crazy thing. I don't have the answers. It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out, though, over the next 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah, I also found that interesting, just hearing you say that it's something that you consciously think about, where your mental health will be later on. And I feel like, that's something that the people who don't like fighting are concerned about for the current players, is that they aren't thinking about it when they're, in the midst of everything. And I'm sure when you were playing, it's not something you were thinking about necessarily at the time. So I think the education, though, over the last like 10, 15 years has gotten better. Like, with these Rempe conversations, you hear people saying that they're sitting him down and talking to him and saying, hey, you don't have to fight every single night, right? So I think, the growth of that is certainly going to help keep fighting in the game, right? Because everyone is so outspoken, like you and, a guy like Carcillo and all these guys who have talked about it, post careers and whatever. But I don't want to, stay on the fighting theme. I got one more for you. And I know we've kept you so long, and we're so thankful for your time, Bobby, but I had to reach out to, something I always like to do when we have guests on here, try to find someone in common. And I got somebody in common with the two of you guys, actually. Jason Berger, a.k.a. Cheese, a good friend of mine. Reached out to him, and I said, give me something good on Bobby. He said, ask him about the latest Scientific American third period edition. So I guess it's something that you used to do in the locker room. You talk about like a magazine you were reading or some shit. You got to tell me the story.
Yeah, I was pretty much a psychopath in full hockey gear, and I was blacked out of my mind. So I had all these very bizarre things that I did, and Colby can attest to that, I'm sure. But I had these, I think part of it looking back was all these little rituals and things to keep me in the zone and keep me outside of that realm of fear that I was existing in. But I had this tradition during the second and third period intermission. I would, at this point, I was fully blacked out at this point, 2 periods into the game. And I would just kind of stand up in the locker room and say something like, hey, I was reading and then the inside joke was every time it'd be a different publication. So some days it was, the Scientific Journal. Some days it was the Rhode Island Slut. That's a shout out from Dumb and Dumber publication.
Uh-huh.
And I would say, I was just reading in the Boston Globe that the P Bruins are a third period team, and I go and go nuts, spit some water on the ceiling.
The guys would go absolute. Look, it didn't matter what Bobby did. He had an infectious energy about him. And, look, I also want to say this to people that are listening and watching the show right now is like, you weren't, look, yes, you were a fighter. You were a tough guy. You were a heavyweight, but you could play. You scored goals into Division I hockey in Hockey East. You were a point guy. Kim Brandevold tells me stories about your ability as one of the coaches at BU who I've become close with. But look, you also, I think Bobby just dropped out. We lost him, but he knew how to impact a game, not just fighting, like forechecking, back checks, good defensive plays. I mean, he really became a spark plug for our team to the point where one year we finished first in the American League. Like we were the top team going into playoffs, and we started our fourth line every game with Bobby on it. He's back. But our fourth line with Bobby started a lot of games that year when we were very good. And it wasn't because Bobby would fight opening shift. It was because your line was very, very impactful. It wasn't just fights. Like, you found a way to enforce will. And I'm not talking running guys from behind either, but you made players uncomfortable with your presence and the finishing of hits. And like I was just telling Jonny and everybody, like, the year we were really good, your line started 70% of the games. Like, right. Our fourth line, you didn't get 25 minutes a night, but you're 12 or 13 minutes or whatever. You started every period, you started every game because you guys would set the tone. And, that's where I like the fighting role. Like, I want fighting in hockey, but I want the guys who can play as well. Like, I think Ryan Reeves can play hockey. Whatever people want to say about him, he can play, he can make a pass, he can skate, but he can enforce. And that's what I like. I like those guys being involved. I played with a guy, David Kochi, in Colorado, who was a big fighter, right? He couldn't play hockey. He could not play hockey. You know what I mean? Like, let's keep the guys who can throw in the game and just make sure they can do the other stuff as well. And I think that's kind of the best of both worlds, because those roles are effective. Come playoff time, those guys on the fourth line can make or break a series as defensemen are thinking about them forechecking. There's a reason I didn't like going against you in practice in forechecking drills, right? There's a reason for that. So, it's important in my opinion, and I'm glad it's still around. And I get annoyed when all these people who aren't playing are the ones worrying about it. It's like, let the players make their own decisions. These are grown adults, okay? And stop worrying so much about other people. Let them worry about themselves. In our society, all we do is worry about the next person. Worry about yourself and your family. Like let's simplify here. So, anyways, I that's my rant, Bobby. But I agree. It's been. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, these guys are, when they're grown men. We're grown men, and we're fighting for a cause. Like, when I was fighting, I was willing to give it everything I had. I was willing to die for it. There's that element of fighting inside of hockey that's, I think there's something very heroic about it. And at the end of the day, men make their own decisions and decide that they're going to do it. I think there is some pressure that people get pressured into that role, obviously. But at the end of the day, like you said, we're all grown men, and we get to make our decisions. And I don't know what the answer is. If you take it out, this debate's been had, but if you take it out of the game, you've seen what happens.
I think the game becomes less safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a reason why it exists.
We want to thank you again so much, and just, allow you one more time to plug your book. Where can people find it? We have a lot of people in our live chat saying, oh my God, like, I'm getting this book right now. Like, this guy's fucking awesome. So you've definitely left a mark here on our listeners for sure this morning, but where can people go buy the book?
Cool. Yeah. So this book's only available at bobbyrobbins.com. So go to bobbyrobbins.com, and we're doing this all ourselves. Like, I'm taking a note from what are the guys, the Duck Dynasty guys, where they're doing this, like, they started and they're keeping it all in family. So that's kind of the vision we have with Sex, Drugs, Pucks, and Souls. So it's only available at bobbyrobbins.com. I'm literally sending it to you. I think it's as pure as it gets as art goes. It's from the artist, from the author, right to the reader. And it's I captured. Hold on, my mic popped out here. I captured the story in my in the book, and it's a savage memoir. So proceed caution. It's not for kids. It's an adult book, but it's the real deal. And if I actually have a special for your listeners, if you go to bobbyrobbins.com and you put in, if you buy a pre-release right now, I have some like signed pre-release and personalized. If you put in the code Morning Cup of Hockey, just as it's spelled, Morning Cup of Hockey, you can get 50% off a signed and personalized book. So give your readers some incentive to head over there and check out the Savage Memoir. And I just appreciate you guys having me on. And I appreciate your following as well. So if any of you guys out there, give me a follow at Bobby Robbins Pro, and you can follow along on this process of releasing a Savage Memoir. That's something that's never been done before. Nothing like this has ever been written in the athletic world. So just buckle up.
I'm going to get mine as soon as we hang up here.
I'm getting one, and I know that I'll be sitting on the beach this summer reading this book, Bobby, and probably like shaking my head like, holy shit, I remember that. And I'm sure it'll bring back some great memories. So thanks for coming on today, man. I really, it's great to see you. It's great to hear you. It's fun to think down memory lane. Those were some interesting years. I mean, we bring up Bruce Cassidy on the show. I mean, it's funny running into him these days, being in, doing TV games, and we've kind of hugged it out and love talking to him now, Uncle Bruce. And I was just in Providence last weekend doing the NCAA tournament. So, naturally I had the group text going with Barkowski and Whitfield, and we were talking Anton Hudobin stories. So
nice.
It's great seeing you, man. Good luck with your family and with the book, and we'll keep talking about the book and keep pumping it. And like I said, I'm going to get one right now. I know Johnny's going to get one too. And I'm sure I'll be reaching out with some comments.
I want mine signed.
I love it. For sure. I
got people in the chat asking me if I'm drinking my own piss right now.
You're nowhere near savage enough.
I know. Yeah.
Like,
Bobby can knock me out with a flick.
What do you think's in my morning cuppa right here?
Oh, come on.
I'm just kidding.
All right, Bobby. Look,
Espresso.
Thanks again, man. We really appreciate it. I know we told you like 20 minutes, and it's been 45. So, as always, man, have a good one and be safe out there. All right, pal.
Yeah, you guys too. A word on the street is I might be making an appearance at the Frozen Four. Walking the streets in a Bruins jersey with a stack of books like this.
Love that. Yeah.
Selling books and telling stories on the street. So
you know where to
broadcast
find
booth.
Yeah.
You'll know where to find me, Bobby.
Yeah, for sure. I'm thinking about heading there. If I'm there, I'll come by and say hello to you guys.
Yeah. Well, listen, just shoot me a text if you come. Okay. I'll be,
cool.
I'm down between the benches for this weekend, but I'll be around. So nice. we'll get together for sure.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
All right,
thanks, guys.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.